Also on his agenda today was pre-taping an exclusive interview with ABC's George Stephanopoulos. That aired within the past hour. I want to talk it through with political analyst Brian Sobel. Brian, as always, it's good to see you. Before we get into it, I actually have a clip. It's about 2 minutes long of Stephanopoulos and Biden speaking. I want to play that out. Let's watch this together.
But your friend Nancy Pelosi actually framed the question that I think is on the minds of millions of Americans. Was this a bad episode or the sign of a more serious condition?
It was a bad episode. No indication of any serious condition. I was exhausted. I didn't listen to my instincts in terms of preparing, and I had a bad night.
You know, you say you were exhausted, and I know you've said that before as well, but you came, and you did have a tough month, but you came home from Europe about 11 or 12 days before the debate, spent 6 days in Camp David. Why wasn't that enough rest time, enough recovery time?
Because I was sick. I was feeling terrible. Matter of fact, the docs with me, I asked if they did a COVID test because they were trying to figure out what was wrong. They did a test to see whether or not I had some infection, a virus. I didn't. They just had a really bad cold.
And did you ever watch the debate afterwards?
I don't think I did, no.
Well, what I want to get at is what were you experiencing as you were going through the debate? Did you know how badly it was going?
Yeah, look, the whole way I prepared, nobody's fault, mine. Nobody's fault but mine. I prepared what I usually would do, sitting down, as I did come back with foreign leaders or the National Security Council for explicit detail. And I realized about partway through that, I get quoted, the New York Times had me down at 10 points before the debate, 9 now, or whatever the hell it is. The fact of the matter is that what I looked at is that he also lied 28 times. The way the debate ran, not my fault, no one else's fault. No one else's fault.
But it seemed like you were having trouble from the first question in, even before he spoke.
Well, I just had a bad night.
Okay, so, Brian, I know you've watched a good amount of this thing so far. It's 22 minutes long.
But your friend Nancy Pelosi actually framed the question.
Apologize for that audio interruption. 22 minutes long was the full thing. What do you make of it? Do you think Biden accomplished what he was trying to get done with this interview?
To the extent that he met with somebody he's known for a very long time. I will give George Stephanopoulos credit. He asked some tough questions. I think Biden's answers, some of them were on point, others weren't. If you listen to Biden here, he threw about everything into this for why he didn't do well. He was sick. He had jet lag. I think he had a rock in his shoe and the sun was in his eyes. So for all those reasons, he didn't do well. Well, even Stephanopoulos, who has been around the game a long time and who quoted Nancy Pelosi, had to ask, whether this was a symptom of something much worse or whether it was, quote unquote, a bad night. And so you heard the president say he just thought it was a bad night.
What's the significance of this being a taped interview instead of something longer and live?
Huge. ABC has indicated they will release a full transcript. I don't know if they'll release the entire tape of the interview, because in the tape of the interview, if it's unedited, you'll see if he has issues through the interview. But if only they release a transcript, it may be of some interest too. So I don't know that this interview helps him. He was made up correctly. The lighting was good. So to the extent that he looked like a more invigorated Joe Biden, he certainly did.
I want to ask you about some of the fallout we've been following so closely over the past 8 days since that debate took place. WAPO says Senator Mark Warner, a Democrat out of Virginia, is attempting to assemble a group of other Democratic senators to ask President Biden to exit the race, according to 2 people with direct knowledge of the effort. The Post says that Warner is telling Democratic senators that Biden can no longer remain in the election. Also today, one of Biden's high-profile campaign surrogates, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey, said in a statement that he should, quote, carefully evaluate whether he remains our best hope to defeat Donald Trump. So, Brian, how do snowball effects start? Is it with stuff like this?
Absolutely. Austin, it just begins, and then, to use your words, snowballs. But there also has to be some consternation within the White House that's leaking out, and that is accepting the idea that maybe this is getting closer to the end than the beginning. And if that's the case, and once a lot of the White House insiders and Biden insiders come to the conclusion that this race can't go on with this person as the candidate for the Democrats, I think enough people will go to him and convince him to step aside. If he's really hard-headed, it's his option. He can say, no, I'm not going to do that. I want my delegates to stay with me. And that's maybe problematic for the Democrats.
You know, I also saw another interesting thing on Twitter today. This one from Congressman Brad Sherman. He represents a portion of the San Fernando Valley in the Los Angeles area. He says, I look forward to seeing President Biden's taped interview with George Stephanopoulos. It's important that the president also have an extended live interview as soon as possible. And it continues, counter to popular belief, the rules of the Democratic Party do not require that pledged delegates vote for Biden at the convention. Party rules require delegates' votes reflect the sentiments of those who elected them at the time the delegates cast their ballots. One more to go through. Democratic primary voters have one overarching sentiment. We need a candidate who will beat Donald Trump. Okay, so that second tweet in particular fascinated me, Brian. Brad Sherman, as far as I know, is a pretty by-the-books Democrat. What did he mean about the delegates?
I think it's a little bit of word salad, to be honest with you. If a delegate is pledged to the president, and pledged in air quotes, it would be hard for that delegate to walk away. In fact, in the past, when delegates on both sides of the aisle attempted to not vote for the person they were there to represent, in this case, Joe Biden, they ran into a real firestorm within their own party. So Sherman may parse this, but at the end of the day, if Joe Biden says, I want my delegates to vote for me, 99% of them will. I guess you could have a defection or two, but highly unlikely that the numbers would be terribly different.
I want to ask you a little bit about Kamala Harris. She has been much the talk lately. It seems with every day that goes by, Harris is getting more and more buzz about being Biden's replacement. Why is she considered the favorite? Obviously, being the vice president plays a part in that, but there's a campaign cash piece to this too, isn't there?
Yes, and I think a lot of Democrats feel like the ticket was Biden and Harris. And if Biden can't serve, then Harris can serve. The issue for the Democrats is that Kamala Harris polls worse at this point than President Biden. So if she were to become the nominee, they'd have a lot of ground to make up. She's controversial in her own right, and there's a lot of people, even within the Democrat arena, that don't really care for her. And so I'm not sure that she's the designee if it isn't the president. I still think, you may have a different Democrat show up. We've talked about Newsom, Whitmer, other people may show up as potential candidates for the Democrats. But I think the next couple of weeks, Austin, are going to be fascinating and telling.
This is a nuts and bolts question I'm sure you get all the time, but do we even have a guess yet as to how the mechanics of such a thing would work? If Vice President Harris were to actually step in and become the person, then that would leave open the vice presidential slot, and then they would have to pick a new vice president. Would, this hypothetical scenario, would that be as simple as Harris handpicking somebody, much like Biden handpicked her?
I would guess that it'd be a little bit different. I think Harris would have to quickly assemble a team of ranking Democrats who would say, "Hey, the person that should be your vice president is so and so." Traditionally, that's not how it happens, as you know. The president, if they're an incumbent or if it's somebody who's going to represent their party, sometime before the convention or even at the convention or near it, they decide who the vice presidential pick will be to move forward to the general election. But if this kind of falls apart here in the next week or so, then Harris, I don't think, can make that choice by herself. I think she'd have to fall back on the party apparatus.
So the other person, you already mentioned him, Gavin Newsom. And I think he's a curious person to watch because we've been seeing him blitzing the country as of late. This is video you're seeing from a campaign stop in Pennsylvania earlier today, Pittsburgh, I believe, specifically. We watched him as he's been stumping for Biden. Is this the behavior of a dutiful surrogate, Brian, or is this the behavior of someone who wants to make sure he's still top of mind if Biden were to step aside? Maybe both.
The latter. I think he is, being a good soldier, out there saying the right things. I'm behind, President Biden 100% until he's not, until there's some other decision that's taken by Democrats and the president, in which case he would be in the mix of 4 or 5 people who could be selected to move forward. And he wants to be where the action is, and the action is on the trail right now, stumping for the president with an eye towards what happens if the president ends up pulling the plug.
All right, Brian, we appreciate your insight. As always, take care. Have a good weekend.
You too, Austin. Have a great weekend.